Hi, everybody. David Nour on behalf of Sales Community. I want to welcome you to another Tech Sales Insights Live. I'm joined by my co-host, Randy Seidl. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Nour. How's it going?
Good to see you. We've got someone that looks like your twin brother as our guest today.
Well, that's a compliment to me. Probably very offensive to Craig, but yeah, known Craig for a while. Great executive, has done a whole bunch on the end user side and the go-to-market side. Now is a bigwig CEO, and the podcast this morning I thought was fantastic. So thanks to both of you, and definitely look forward to the next hour.
That sounds great. Craig, welcome. So for those who may not know you, how about we start with a brief intro?
Hey, David, Randy, it's great to be here, guys. So Craig Hinkley, the CEO of WhiteHat Security. I've been the CEO now coming on 6 years, and it's been an absolute pleasure to be in the security industry, in the security market over the last 6 years, but also in the last 12 months with COVID-19 and everyone accelerating online to digital commerce. The push for security has been fantastic. But yeah, Australian born and raised, been in the US now since 97, so it's 24 years. As Randy said, spent a lot of time initially on the customer side at companies like Bank of America and Cisco before joining the dark side and going to the technology provider side at companies like Hewlett Packard, where I met Randy and took the haircut to match Randy, and then from there to TIBCO Software, where I was running their LogLogic, call it operational intelligence platform before becoming CEO at WhiteHat. So it's been a great 24 years in the US, I must admit.
It was great to have you on, as Randy mentioned, for our audience, podcast episode 22 this morning, all about leading from within with Craig. So make sure you check that out when you get a chance. I also want to encourage you. We're live right now on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. I'd love to have you jump in with questions of me, Randy, of course, Craig, and we'll take those live while we're all together. So, Craig, let me start by building on our conversation. One of the questions I asked of you was, are there some predictors of what you believe could be great sales reps? You've hired a lot of sales reps. You've been around some fantastic sales reps. And I really appreciate your comment around process orientation, the right DNA, and if they're coachable. Talk about those, build on those comments. And more importantly, I want to know, how do you know? Because in an interview, they can tell you all that and show you all that. But how do you actually get a sense early on that they're going to be the right fit culturally?
Yeah, that's a great question, because any good sales rep by nature is going to be good at sales. So an interview process, they're going to be incredibly good at being able to convince you of their skills and abilities. But actually, one of the things that to me, David, is also critical is this is such a small industry that reputation is also critical as well. Because if you've been someone who's been a fantastic, high-performing sales rep, who's built credibility, deep client relationships, then you're actually going to have a good reputation. And I could reach out to folks like yourself or Randy, and with probably 2 or 3 degrees of separation, I can be talking to someone who's managed you, led you, worked with you, or was a client of you in your career. So that's certainly one of the things I make sure people understand, is that your reputation in this industry will follow you no matter where you go. So always be conscious and cognizant of how you make sure that you're living to your values and that you're holding yourself to higher standards, because that to me is one of the things that will do you well in life, but certainly as you go and look for new sales opportunities.
Randy, your sales recruiting world, you actually talk about this, that do, what do you call it, blind references or kind of side reference checks? Talk about that a second. How do you get a good glimpse of a sales rep's right process orientation, right DNA if they're coachable, as a high predictor of their success?
Yeah, I mean, some may disagree with me. So textbook is, you ask the questions, personality profiles, blah, 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 blah. But I would argue is doing reference checking early in the process versus at the end. You can waste all kinds of time. You do a reference check. I would argue most companies half the time check references with somebody that they don't know, which is useless. So for me, for when we are doing recruiting for companies, it'll either be somebody that I know well firsthand, or if not secondhand. So I can go to LinkedIn. I'm interviewing, I'm looking at Jane Doe. Okay, I see Craig and Nour both connected to her. Hey, do you know her? Yes. And, typically it's never an in-between. Either it's a thumbs up or thumbs down, but kind of all those objective attributes that Craig listed, being able to validate that with somebody that knows the person, whether it's somebody that they've worked with, worked for, end user customer, a partner, is invaluable.
Craig, one of the things we talked about is obviously WhiteHat Security. And just for our audience, share a little about what WhiteHat does. And I want to come back to this talent question in a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David. So WhiteHat Security is in the application security space of cybersecurity. So we help our clients secure the applications that run their digital business. So for folks out there that are watching this live, what that means is if you've got a website, a web application, or a mobile app that you've got running live in the cloud, or a mobile app, obviously a mobile device, WhiteHat scans those applications to find security vulnerabilities that the hackers can exploit to get to sensitive data, confidential information, or get inside and install malware into the application or inside the company. So we're all about how do we help our clients find those vulnerabilities so then they can assess the risk of those and take the appropriate steps to mitigate. So we're all about making sure that our clients don't get breached.
And you mentioned, as we've had other guests, Peter McKay from Sneak and Ed Sim from Bold Start Ventures, talk a lot about this fundamental shift to the left of really security going more to the developers and really engaging at the app development level, kind of integrating security. Talk about that a second.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually think this is going to be fundamental. If we're going to help secure the digital economy, then we have to actually fix these security vulnerabilities and defects at the source, and that's no pun intended, but I mean at the source code. So as the developers are writing the applications, we need to make security a quality feature, well, a feature of software quality, the same way we do with speed, performance, reliability today. So when the developers are writing the applications, they should be testing for security the same way that they test for functionality, performance, speed of the application. So the folks from Sneak and others have absolutely got it right. We at WhiteHat believe what they believe as well, which is that embedding development in the new DevOps agile process and what some people call DevSecOps, development security operations, to form that continuous cycle is going to be fundamental for us to get a real handle and control. The analogy would be like if you had a car rolling off a production line. If you waited till the car rolled off the production line and then checked whether the brakes worked or whether the engine worked, or it'd be pretty unreliable to be driving down the freeway and go, okay, well, the brakes don't work. There's quality built into that whole factory. So in our software factories, we need to embed security as one of those quality measures.
So Randy, several of our, it must be a nature of the sales community, because several of our previous guests have recently raised additional capital at some fantastic valuations, and security seems to be a really hot space. I know you work with a lot of venture capital and private equity groups. Are you still seeing a growth in the security space? I mean, are there still new entrants, or are there segments of the space that are still welcoming new security entrants?
Yeah, I mean, and SolarWinds may have even helped the cause even more, but I think there's huge opportunities, and obviously those are large valuations. Those are a lot of very smart investors that are putting money in, assuming that they're going to get a fantastic return off that. So I'd say yeah, for sure. And amazingly enough, large global enterprise companies, back 20 years ago, startup, they'd say, hey, no way. But now everybody's just so accustomed to it that they're flexible, and you can really go and grow immensely.
So all of that to get to this question, and I'm going to start with Craig, and Randy, I want you to jump in. Do you believe finding exceptional talent on the sales side, on the development side, on the customer success side, BDRs, just think of global talent. Has it become more difficult through this pandemic, or has it become easier because you really can find people anywhere and have them join you virtually? Craig, let me start with you.
Yeah, so that's a double-edged sword, because this whole COVID-19 and people working virtually has certainly enabled us to capture talent literally anywhere on the planet. So for those who are trying to find the talent, that's great, because now I don't have to worry about where you're geolocated. We've built the processes and we can integrate you in. On the flip side of that, it also means people can come steal your talent. And what my hypothesis at the start of COVID is that people would be hunkered down and not moving around. But in fact, we've found an incredibly healthy and robust hiring environment We've had some people leave White Hat, being recruited out. We've also been able to recruit some great talent from other companies. So I've been very surprised, David, that it's actually been incredibly robust in terms of the movement of talent. And COVID both helps us because we can actually get from anywhere, but also hurts us because people can use that against us to take our great talent as well.
Randy, build on that. Talent, more difficult, easier to find during this pandemic?
I'd say, probably yes and yes. I think if you're, just like selling relationships, if you don't have relationships on the recruiting side, any, kind of stranger to go and reach out to somebody is kind of a hard thing to do. But if you're plugged in, have the trust, Ken Doherty says, know me, like me, trust me. But if you kind of have those relationships, you can, get a look with anybody, have them, consider the opportunity. And then the other hand, although I, make money recruiting, I have a lot of people who'll call and ask me, hey, what do you think? And they always think I'm going to say, yeah, leave, jump, and hey, let me help you place you. But more times than not, I'll always say the grass is not always greener. And wherever you are, think about the things that you don't like or that are wrong or broken, you want to fix. Have the conversation with your management to say, look, I'm not that happy, or I'm looking, hey, can we, fix ABC? And for whatever reason, management don't necessarily ask the people that work for them, and the employees don't necessarily ask the managers, kind of having those conversations. So I'd say that's something that's also needed for sure.
For our audience, if you've joined us late, you're listening to Craig Hinkley, CEO of WhiteHat Security. I would encourage you to jump in with questions, comments, Randy and Craig. So let's talk about sales management. And again, Craig, I'm going to start with you. Is it always the best path to promote a really sharp sales rep to a manager? And what unique skills delineates a great sales rep from a great sales manager or leader?
So, thanks, David. It's not always a perfect predictor to take a great sales rep and promote him into management, but I do believe that actually a great sales rep who demonstrates ability to lead a team is a perfect progression. And really, as you promote a sales rep into a sales leader, I think the core characteristics is process-centric. And if you actually had a chance in the sales reps in your organization, you've had a chance to assess that. So you can see their level of actually diligence around the process, because they really need to be methodical about their approaching of the sales process. Because to me, that's one of the things in building a predictable, repeatable, scalable revenue engine. It's about the application of the process. So for a sales manager, that to me is one of the core fundamental elements of success, as well as being data driven. I mean, it's one thing I love about sales. At the end of the quarter whether you've made the goal or not. So it's very binary about whether performance is there or not. So I like that. So a sales manager has to have, deep, kind of respect of and adherence to the sales process, and using data to be able to measure and understand how the organization is performing, but also be able to build the team around them. Every sales rep needs coaching. And Randy's a great example of that. When I work with him and for him, he would be always actively coaching the sales reps on the deal process. Who's the buyer? Who's the economic buyer? What's the close process? What's the purchasing? I mean, a sales manager and leader, it's really about how do they build that discipline into their entire organization, and then become a good coach to coach the team around how to make sure they can work through deals and then deal with situations as they arise.
Randy, I'm going to ask you a different question. Biggest mistakes you've made in promoting a sales rep to a sales manager?
That's a great question. I'd say it's not just, so I agree with everything that Craig just said, but a lot of times, financial services may be a great example as well. It's not just somebody who puts on, great numbers, but which I know Greg also looks at, but it's kind of peeling back the onion on kind of what are the behaviors. Does a person share best practices? Do they, help others? Are they doing things for other people? Or are they just kind of, all about themselves? So you have to be, a true team player. And in hindsight, over the years, there's definitely people who you put into management, and it takes a while because that's what they think they want to do. And then there's something to be said for people that are just individual contributors for the rest of their lives, and they can do well. They have a great lifestyle, but they just weren't cut out to be managers.
So was that from your personal reflections and personal mistakes?
Hey, life would be a lot easier, right, Craig? If we're just if you're a GAM on B of A, life would be a lot easier, right?
So I want to go to Tucker. Randy, Tucker's got a question.
Oh, great. Thanks, Tucker. If you're a SDR or AE interested in making a transition into the security space, what's the best advice to make yourself a good candidate if you hadn't sold security solutions? And then let me just kind of add in as another spin on here. So I've got friends that are kind of CROs that I say have, enterprise sales experience, not necessarily security, doing really well. And then you go to a lot of these companies where it's okay, you have to be just security. If you're not security, there's no way you can be successful. So kind of build that into your answer as well, if you could.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tucker, Randy hits on something, because a great sales rep or an SDR or an account exec, they've proven flexibility over the time, because no two deals are the same. So you've got to be able to demonstrate your ability to handle different situations. There are some companies who will say you have to, as Randy said, only be security and have security knowledge. My advice there would be find the ability to do some information and courses online so you can get experience and knowledge of the security space. But if you are looking at a particular security company, do research on them. Find out what their product space is, and if nothing else, research their products and their market so you can go in informed about what they do. So you may not know the whole industry, but at least show respect the fact that you're learning about that company and their products, and your willingness to learn about the rest of the market.
That's critical. Randy, anything to add to that?
Yeah. So I guess so. If you were to say, if you had somebody who was a great enterprise, or I'm sorry, just a great SDR individual contributor with no security experience, you would strongly consider that person. Sounds like you're saying, right?
Yes, I would consider them, particularly coming into that entry level. Part of what we do at WhiteHat is we have our revenue enablement, sales enablement function, where we train them on the solutions, on the process, of the methodologies, but more importantly, the technical capabilities, the value proposition. So we would absolutely consider, because it's really about, as you said, Randy, testing for the aptitude. Yeah, I'm looking for the right culture fit. I'm looking for the right aptitude and attitude, and people who are willing to demonstrate they're going to go above and beyond. So again, someone who comes in, maybe done some research, maybe done an online class around security, showing their interest in this space and their willingness to learn. I will place a bet on that individual, and certainly consider them.
Yeah. Craig, I want to build on that. If I have the right attitude, if I have the right aptitude, if I demonstrate that I have interest and there's some skills that are transferable, is there a timeline that you're looking for me to get pretty competent and capable and be able to engage and articulate a security executive? How long would it take me to learn?
So that's a really good question, David. For our enterprise sales model today, we expect about a 9-month ramp from the time you join the company to being able to then hit your full portion of your annual quota on a quarterly basis. So I would look at it as you've got potentially here a 6-month ramp to 9-month ramp to learn about the industry, learn about the market and the products. But again, if you understand value selling, if you understand how to understand the customer problem, the customer need, and you've got the right capabilities to learn, I'm confident that anyone can actually come in and learn about the industry and the segment. And then obviously having a great SE beside you who's going to come in with you to walk through the technical elements for the client, because the security sales is still very technical centric. It's a very tech centric sales process. So again, positioning that sales rep with a great SE will also help them come up the ramp as well.
The other thing that, Craig, I found out from our conversation on the podcast that me, you, Randy have in common is when we were selling or leading in some ways, RevOps wasn't a thing, right? It didn't exist. And I got to tell you, I love your definition. I actually captured it, right? The operational rigor and the telemetry on revenue function performance. Talk about RevOps and RevOps at WhiteHat and why it's so critical to your go-to-market strategy.
David, when I first was in the sales, yes, operations was the folks who effectively send out the weekly report telling you what your pipeline was and what your closed deals were. I mean, it was that simple, effectively. But today, in WhiteHat RevOps, and I think I used this in the podcast, I consider them as the guardians and oversight of the sales process. For us at WhiteHat, the revenue ops team is really the link between what happens in the field and the CRO. Often the revenue ops team here at WhiteHat, in fact, they run the sales forecast calls. So they're really looking at deal inspection, forecasting cadence. They're the deal desk. They're also looking at compliance with discounting. They're running the QBRs, so they're doing the interlocks. They're really driving that cross functional partnership with all the different elements of the revenue engine. Because I actually do see revenue today as an engine, and to me, the RevOps team is like the timing belt that's keeping everything synchronized and working smoothly together.
Randy, how often are you seeing RevOps really clicking on all cylinders? How important is RevOps to the CROs you talk to? Talk about RevOps a second.
Yeah, I mean, it's invaluable in terms of how often you see it clicking. It might be if it's an oxymoron, but it's the same thing with marketing. I mean, how often do you see that clicking? So it's if our broad generality might be half the companies, and certainly in the tenure that Craig and I have had, 10 years ago to now, just the whole kind of sales and marketing technology companies and resources that exist are just kind of night and day difference for sure. Craig, question back to you. So, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you'd never say, hey, somebody that's revenue ops centric could actually become a CRO. Well, what do you think about the statement that, hey, somebody that's mostly revenue ops goes to do sales for a little bit? What do you think of that person's likelihood of kind of being successful on the sales management and potentially CRO side someday?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Randy. If I look at today at WhiteHat, our RevOps leader, and I'm worried about saying her name because someone will come steal her from us. But but Tanya Gay, who runs that for us today. Tanya, yeah. I'm not going to say it again, so you're not going to get me in recruiter way. No, you're not going to get that out of me, Randy.
Yeah.
But Tanya is an amazing head of revenue ops for us, and I think she's got two paths available for her. One is up towards a COO, because I look at what a COO does, Chief Operating Officer in a company, and really being again that timing belt for the broader functions across the whole business. So that's one path I think that someone running revenue ops can have. And then I do believe that there also is the opportunity to head to the CRO, because the ops leader does absolutely have complete view into how the sales process and the entire revenue business works. And as I said, like an engine of a car, they've actually understand all the pieces and the mechanics. So I actually do believe it is possible for a RevOps leader to go to the CRO, because they've also going to build then the respect and trust of the sales organization through the way they've interacted and help lead them through the sales and forecasting QBR strategic planning processes.
Craig, I want to go in a little slightly different direction. One of the fascinating aspects of your background to me was that you went from in-house. You were within the technology team at Bank of America. You were in-house at Cisco as a buyer of tech products and services. What I want to know, and this is part of the Nour Tough Love, talk about 2-3 attributes you really appreciated about tech sales professionals, teams that called on you. And what were the 2-3 things that you just detested? What did you just kind of, made you cringe in that process?
Yeah, that's great. And this may be the classic sort of answer. So, for example, when I was at Bank of America, I was running all of the network infrastructure, network services. So back then, including the telecom spend, it was about a $1.2 billion operating budget in terms of expenses that we did between telco spend and buying hardware and technology from companies like Cisco at the time. And what I really respected about the sales teams that came through was the fact that they took the time to understand the problem, the business problem, and what we're trying to solve. And they would actually work with myself and the rest of the team to understand, what some of the limitations were. And then they would go away, think, come back, and actually propose a solution that actually solved the problem. And what the sales leaders and companies I truly respected as well, Dave, was when those who came in and listened and said, actually, I don't think we can solve this problem. This is not for us. It doesn't really fit, but you know what? I appreciate your time. Because you know what? I will take another call from them because they were candid and direct about it. So those people who will spend time, listen, understand the problem, and come back and propose a solution that actually solves my problem is phenomenal. And then the ones obviously that just after that first meeting, like, you'll turn to my assistant and go, just never book a meeting with that person again. And Randy talked about it.
Blacklist. There's a blacklist of people I don't ever want to see again.
Yeah, exactly. This person I do not want to meet with. And part of it was, as Randy said, about selfish. Is it all about them? And even in a meeting, you can just tell that it's all about what they want, or they're so obvious with their gratuities and their platitudes that you just walk away going, I'm sorry, I just met you and you're trying to treat me as though we're 10-year buddies and mates. And yeah. I'm sorry, maybe if we do work together and do business for 10 years together, we might get to that point, but don't try and force that. So it just seems so unauthentic, and I suppose it doesn't seem genuine. So I suppose now I look for the folks who come in and are authentic, genuine, and willing to really understand what the problems are and help solve my problems, not make their quota.
Randy, do you still, I call that like oozing with cheese, right? It's cringeworthy of what some people do. You still see that, or has tech sales matured to a place where a lot of those really competent sales reps have become managers and leaders, and they're really putting their imprint of that professional selling on their organization?
Yeah, I think some of that cheese is kind of probably weaning itself out, but certainly can be cringeworthy, and I think that's a great opportunity for those that are young, right? I mean, it's relationships now matter, especially a lot during COVID. But I think those that are younger, that can be more nimble, that can utilize the tools, that can come up with the right value props, that can be sharp and crisp. I think there's a probably much bigger opportunity now than when we all started our careers in terms of being successful and moving up faster.
Craig, let's talk about marketing. One of the things you and I talked about was, and Randy has a love-hate relationship with getting marketing and sales to work really closely together.
Sure.
But let's talk about.
It doesn't always work. I love it. I don't have anything against it. Just most people don't do it well.
And I love the fact that you've seen Seidl has seen money just get spent on things that he scratches his head like, where's that going? But we talked about there's no trade shows, there's no demo days, there's no. The stuff that tech industry, tech sales used to do isn't there. And you said marketing has to work that much harder to really create a more crisp message. Talk about that, and how do they do that? And if you don't have that brand recognition, right? If you're not HP or Dell or Oracle or some of these big brands, how do you get into a new conversation, new relationship?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I mean, marketing to me is one of those areas of the revenue engine that are critically important. So that they fundamentally have to drive the messaging, the branding. They have to work closely to define the ideal customer profile, the campaigns. As you said, with COVID-19, with all of the, call it the traditional routes to identifying and bringing leads into a business, they go to an RSA, go to another security event somewhere around the world and generate literally hundreds of thousands of leads. That has gone away. So they've had to work harder and be smarter in getting eyeballs. And we actually measure effectively share of voice. So we actually have an ARPR agency that tracks our share of voice out there in the different digital channels. So we track that on a monthly basis to see where we're at relative to our competitors. To your point, that's about, are we getting in to the right podcasts? Are we getting articles published? Are we creating and publishing articles ourselves on LinkedIn, in Forbes and other tech journals, because that's today, without those traditional mechanisms, you've got to be out there, in this digital content, in this digital world, getting eyeballs and attention back into the company. And then the other thing is making sure that your whole web presence, your whole website is engaging, that crisply communicates your company's value prop to your key constituents, because the worst thing you do is attract the eyeballs. They come to your website, which now is where a lot of the leads are coming into, and they look at it and go, I don't understand what this company does.
Randy.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Traditionally tech companies have, technical founders, and they don't really get sales. They don't really get marketing. Marketing goes off kind of on their own island. Sales is upset. Geez, they're wasting all this money. How do you make sure you have kind of that alignment there, number one, and number two, that your kind of marketing is accountable and has some type of real ROI measurement?
And just to build on that, David, what Randy said, it's one of the things that I've used a couple of times at different companies I've worked at, because there's the disconnect between marketing teams who are creating all this collateral and the sales organization going, marketing never delivers anything for me, nothing of value that I can use. And Randy's laughing because he's heard that argument probably 100 times. So what? Yeah, it's this. They all point to each other. But what I've found, just a simple thing, I would simply go in and ask the marketing team, show me all the content you've created and show me the downloads. Show me how many people have downloaded that content and they're using it. So that to me is just a very fundamental measure, because if you've got all this content but no sales team member has downloaded it, then that just highlights the gap. You've wasted all this time, energy, and effort to create this content and collateral. It's not being used by sales. Does that solve the problem? No, but then opens up the conversation of, well, okay, why not? So sales team, why aren't you using the collateral? And that's really where you've got to get to make these two cylinders of the car work together, yin and yang. That's the dialogue that you need to have. So you need a good sales revenue leader and a good marketing leader who can have that sort of really candid conversation of, this content is just, it doesn't hit the market, doesn't carry the message, it's not resonating with clients, so we're not using it. Or sometimes it's, oh, we didn't even know it was there.
Do you believe marketing should report to a CRO? Or are they peers?
Great question. At WhiteHat today, we have marketing reporting to the CRO.
And is that to create alignment and kind of accountability to one? I call it the one neck to choke. Yeah. Is that the one neck to choke?
Yeah, I remember being from California. It's the single back to pat.
That's the kinder, gentler way of saying it, right?
Exactly. And it's both back to pat, throat to choke. And sometimes you do both. But it is. I mean, so that point, it provides that accountability. Because to me, the revenue leader is not just a sales leader. The revenue leader is driving that entire function. So they've got to own the marketing. They've got to own that end-to-end process to be able to deliver quality revenue. So in our model, I do see marketing as part of that revenue function. Including
channels? Channels also rolls up to a CRO?
Yes, absolutely.
Randy, are you seeing that model increasingly where there's a CRO with marketing, with BDRs, with channels, with customer success, all of that in one place?
Yeah, I mean, what Craig just said is probably definitely the minority as opposed to the majority. But again, that's because he's go to market and he's seen all the time wasted where they're all separate. And again, if it's one throat to choke, everybody's there, they're all on the same page, same team. So I didn't know that he had that, but that's definitely the right way to do it. And it doesn't necessarily mean over time that CRO is somebody who's, just came up from the sales ranks. I think, as we said before, could be a revenue ops, could be a marketing, could be a channel, but you kind of have that, that revenue leader, and revenue is inclusive of kind of all these different areas. And selfishly for Craig, it probably makes his life a lot easier too.
Talking about making Craig's life easier. On that note, you, again, another interesting twist in this career journey of yours. I'm not sure if it's a ladder or a lattice, but you went from this great sales and then general management role at your TIBCO to now CEO. So what was that transition like from going, and again, there was increasing responsibilities along the way. What were the biggest struggles in the title and the job, and what has been the biggest surprise in the job for you?
Yeah, so that was and I got to be very, because people will see this, so I can't BS you guys or the audience, because my white hat teammates will call me on it. If someone had asked me going into the CEO job, okay, you've been a general manager, you've worked at some large companies, how much of those skills are transferable to the CEO job, and how much do you need to learn? And I would have done the classic 80-20. 80% of my skills are transferable. There's probably 20% I need to learn. But the reality was, it was the opposite. I think only about 20% of my skills transferred, and I had to learn 80% of what it meant to be a CEO. So for me, it was a very humbling experience, to be very honest, David and Randy. And I would say in my first year, I really struggled with that, and the team saw that struggle. And one of them was, I had to learn to be myself as a leader and not pretend to be the CEO. As I had this preconception of what I thought a CEO had to do and be and act and sound, and it actually created, so I kind of put on the clothes or the costume of a CEO, and that really smothered who I was as a natural leader, and it confused people as well, about how I show up, who I was. So I actually had to learn to be more of my true, authentic self. And I just happened to be the CEO. So that was certainly one of the things I had to learn. And the other big thing was how to manage a board. That's because it's very different than working for a company where you have by reporting structure a boss or a leader, whereas in a venture-backed, private equity-backed company, I have a board, and I had to learn how to lead that board, because really their only real responsibility is to hire and fire the CEO. Outside of that, if you don't lead them, they will lead you. So I had to really learn that aspect of it. And then the last thing was, and a good friend of mine taught me this saying: "You're never not the CEO."
Very true. Talk about one neck to choke. You're it, right? Your name is at the top of that structure. Randy, you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I guess knowing Craig, I know that 20% probably is more like, probably 60, 65%. But I think, inherently people get promoted up because they're good people. They care, they're thoughtful. And in Craig's case, very authentic, very much a servant leader. So he may have put on that CEO outfit for a little bit and then took it off and decided, figured out, hey, I can just be myself. But I think, especially as we selling to CIOs or CFOs or CISOs or other CEOs, people get promoted up because they are sincere, genuine. They, give and get feedback and all that, which is, I think, inherently what Craig's DNA is, why he's done so well. And I think, he'll continue to do well. So more of a statement as opposed to a question. And Craig, feel free to disagree if you want.
I'm sure there's plenty of people out there, Randy, who would disagree with you, but very practical example. Randy and I, we may look alike. Randy's high energy. I consider myself, relative to Randy, below his energy, but still good amounts of energy. And I had to actually learn that energy, while infectious, can actually also create a negative outcome, which is, people are forced away by that energy sometimes. And, I would be excited in a meeting, let's go brainstorm about an idea, and I'd be all excited and jazzed. And I had to learn that people took that as, well, Craig already has an answer to this question. He can't be this excited unless he has an answer. So I actually had to learn to kind of really pull back and operate within myself, so I could create the space for the team and my leaders around me to kind of come in closer to me. So that was again, a strength overplayed, in this case, became a weakness. And I was pushing people away versus allowing them the space to come in and get close and work with me.
I love that, where strength can also stumble you. So, Randy, are you seeing a lot of sales leaders? Again, think of, you've known some of these executives since your EMC days. Are you seeing them evolve into GMs, into CEOs? And what are some of the bigger stumbling blocks for them in that journey?
Yeah, I mean, myself included, and others would be shocked at how people have been able to do well. But I think it's you got to learn, you got to take feedback, and we all mature in a lot of different ways. So it's something that you know continue to go and grow, and you know not that it's easy, but I think it's something that you want. You got the aptitude and the desires. You know, Craig said talking about hiring top sales talent. If you got the desire and the aptitude, theoretically the sky's the limit. Nour, one thing I was going to ask you, tied in on your kind of with your curve bender side of things. But the ability of people to kind of take feedback and actually give it back. So if you think about, I could see, Craig at a team meeting, okay, he genuinely wants feedback. But Nour, do you find a lot that people just aren't used to? They're used to being led and told. They're not used to kind of rolling ideas on their own and giving feedback. What do you see there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I often, and I heard this, I can't take credit for it. I heard somewhere else, where somebody told the executive, your suggestions are not suggestions, they're orders, right? So what I coach leaders to do is, you want better answers, ask better questions. And if you open up, you kind of know where or you have some idea, or you want to guide them in a general direction. If you articulate this vision, the outcome you're after, and then really kind of ask great questions. And that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Or how would you get there? And what would that look like? And you're really now creating an environment of inquiry. And that inquiry leads to some really interesting discussions. Sometimes people may surprise the heck out of you, especially if you let them work on how they, as long as it's within legal and ethical boundaries, how they get there may actually really surprise you. So Randy, one of my favorite coaching techniques is just ask better questions. And if you spend, and by the way, for most leaders, and present company excluded, but a lot of alpha male leaders, it's very easy for all of us to just give them the answer, right? Spend a few more minutes on that inquiry. Spend a few more minutes on, I wonder what that would look like. And it's amazing. And by the way, for our audience, Hal Gregerson is the executive director of the MIT Leadership Forum and Institute. And he's got a great book. The title of it is Questions Are the Answers. And Hal's big on, if you ask enough questions, it's amazing how often you'll get exactly to that answer. So thanks for asking that. Randy, we've got a question from someone in our sales community.
All right, great. And just tied into that other one too, I'd say that's probably why women and females are such great leaders, right? I mean, it plays into the hand of everything that you need to be successful. Anyway, from sales community, we're seeing CRO roles evolving recently. Is it going to be a requirement for revenue leaders to have backgrounds not only in sales but also in marketing and rev ops? So I think we kind of covered this before, but I think the short answer is yes. Craig?
Yeah, I think experiencing would be great. Knowledge and working around it would also be important, because we've also got to recognize that sometimes leaders coming in won't have been in all of these potential positions, but at least been in a role where they've worked closely with it, or indirectly or directly led those functions. Absolutely. It's certainly the more of those skill sets you have, I think the greater it improves your chance of getting a CRO title, particularly as that function, that role continues to evolve.
Craig, I titled the title of our episode this morning, Leading from Within, because I thought that was a really interesting story you came up with. Share that story of what that means to you, and also like the hashtag. We got to talk about the hashtags you've incorporated into the discussions.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. So it's interesting because it goes back to the first year and a half when I was CEO at WhiteHat, and the learnings I had to really take away from that and really pivot my leadership back to, as Randy said, a more authentic style, more me. But leading from within is the confidence that you know who you are, what you stand for, what you believe. Also knowing that you will fail, but also you'll learn from failure and recover quickly. And the other thing you have to do is, how you inspire really emanates from your vision and passion. And what I had to do was, again, develop a leadership style that, instead of trying to push people along and create the space so they could come into and work with me. And what you're talking about here, what David's alluding to, is that energy that I talked about. What I learned was that if I wanted to have, like a brainstorming session with my team, and I'll take in what you said, Dave. One of the things I had to learn was speak last, because you're never not the CEO. So every time you speak, it always goes through the receiver's lens that that's the CEO speaking. So you've got to be very conscious of that. And then by speaking last, I created the space, but also I get excited. That's just one of my character defects or my character defaults. When I like something, I get excited. And that's just, it's something I had to be conscious of. But also, so what I did with my team, I created, you said, these hashtags. So it's hashtag brainstorming, hashtag consulting, hashtag selling, hashtag telling. So those are my 4 primary modes of communication. So if we're in a meeting and I'm want to do a brainstorming, I will actually say to the team, okay, hashtag brainstorming. Don't know this area, don't know an idea, really want to get all ideas on the table. Or hashtag consulting, want to brainstorm this with you, got some ideas, want to run some options with you and get your input. So that way, and even in emails, I'll do that, or my Slack channels and Slack messages, I'll put hashtag consulting, hashtag brainstorming, hashtag selling. So it lets my team know, okay, try and discount maybe some of that energy. Craig really wants to engage in a brainstorming or a consulting session. So it's just more about awareness, knowing that, the journey I'm on to be a better leader is a continuous journey. And the work I do today will make, I'm better today than I was yesterday. And the work I'm going to do today will hopefully make me a better leader tomorrow than I am today. And being vulnerable to tell your team exactly that.
Seidl, you've been at this technology sales space for a long time. You've, I think I met you 10, 15 years ago. How do you still learn? How do you still grow? What's the source of that light that kind of lights in within you to continue to drive and continue to improve?
Yeah, I think, continuous improvement, back from the, Japanese continuous improvement, Deming, all that good stuff is, I think inherent in, most of us. So I think you have to have a desire amongst a lot of other things to continue to always be your best. And just the people you expose yourself to, the resources, I have Tucker and Jesse, who are fantastic, kind of different, younger, DNA, and, amazing, how many things I learned there. And, just kind of being a fan of reading and improving. And, there's so much that, we don't know. And, it's hard. There's not enough hours in the day to try and learn everything you can, but just, pick up probably nuggets every day.
Craig, you also said in our conversation that you challenge everything you know.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, startup companies, have to do. We've got to be willing as leaders to wake up every day and challenge everything we thought we knew, and challenge our assumptions, and be willing to admit we may be wrong, and willing to admit when we are wrong and change course. The valley is littered with companies who weren't willing to accept they were down the wrong path, and the valley's got some great companies who have morphed and changed and adapted, and that all comes from the willingness to wake up and say, do I believe what I believed yesterday still? Or has the market changed? Has the customer dynamic changed? Has our ability to execute in that changed? And we need to pivot. Just to build on what Randy said about growing as a leader, I think the first thing is awareness. You have to have awareness of your strengths and your weaknesses. And that's one of the toughest things as leaders, because we only often get told what people think we want to hear. So getting the situational awareness, and that's why for me, a coach, I have a CEO coach I meet with weekly, and I use that coach. Like every great team, every great sports person has a coach, no matter if they're the number 1 athlete in the world. Usain Bolt had a sprint coach, even when he was winning every competition by 2 meters, which was unheard of. So I'm not as foolish to think that I don't need a coach who can help improve me, point out my weaknesses and deficiencies and what I need to do differently or better.
Randy, I know you and I both also coach, other leaders, other executives. I'm fascinated, to build on Craig's comment, how in sports and entertainment, people who are already doing well in their world hire a coach to even get better at that world, get better at kind of their craft.
Yeah.
Somehow in business, the perception is you hire a coach because you're broken, or you hire a coach to fix something.
Yeah.
Where does coaching come into your conversations with folks, and where have you seen someone really benefit from a coach?
Yeah. So I guess this is a lob for me to mention Tom Brady.
Okay. Don't go there. Don't do it. Craig, I live in Atlanta, and every chance Randy Seidl gets a chance, he just kind of digs that 28-3 in.
I almost made it 49 minutes in. Yeah, I think it's just something. It's all part of our DNA. Nour, you've been, very, very helpful to me over the years. And I think just having, again, it's going back to you said before, just like in meetings, it's the questions, right? Asking the questions, things you haven't thought of, and, doing all you can do to, be better and improve in all ways, just like athletes do, just like, business people need to do, just like teachers need to do, and others.
Craig, customer centricity. I know it's a passion of yours. How do you believe that focus on not just a great customer service or customer experience will evolve in the post-pandemic world? What's happening to really getting everybody attuned to a customer-centric culture?
Yeah, me, customer centricity, David, once you get through that sales process, even through the sales process, putting the customer problem first, understanding the customer need is important. Post-sale, the customer success organization. And it's amazing how many times you hear people talk about customer success or their customer, and they'll speak like, oh, well, I know my customer will do this. And they speak for the customer versus actually, how do I put myself actually at the center of the customer's world and base everything from being in their shoes, in their business. And that to me is fundamental. And customer success, it's evolving the intimacy around understanding the business problems, not just their usage of your solution, what are they using it to do? So the outputs of what we all deliver in our solutions, how are they using that internally? What's the value that they're deriving from this? How do you get a handle and understanding that so you can potentially offer greater and more enhanced services, and getting close to them? We run, like a lot of companies do that have customer success, we run quarterly business reviews, QBRs with our customers, where we walk through our scorecard about what we did, how we performed, but also turning it over to them and say, how do you think we performed? Where did we fall short? Where did we miss your expectations? And where did we outperform? Where did we delight you? What can we do that delights you more?
These are actual conversations with customers on a quarterly basis on how we're doing?
Absolutely. And then
so
we also have
surveys. You're not doing goofy surveys. You're just kind of static. This is live, proactive. Who's on those calls?
So we will normally have our customer success manager. So every account will have a customer success manager, a CSM assigned to them. So it'll be the CSM person, the sales rep on the account as well. And then depending on the size of the client, we may then also have the leader for all of the customer success organization, or the sales leader, or in some of our top 10 clients, myself and or the CRO will often be on those calls as well to let the client know how much we value what they do and their business to us.
So Seidl, one of the things you and I are seeing more of is that the SaaS business model, where you get, the ARR and the renewals that come up every year, seems like it's elevating the role and the investment in that customer success function. Talk about that a second. Are you seeing it more in companies, and are we paying more attention to retention, or is the SaaS business model just driving that?
Yeah, huge. I mean, you've got all kinds of metrics that are, I'm sure Craig has, or, any of the, private company investors, or, Wall Street has around any of these metrics. I mean, customer success, again, 10, 15 years ago might have been a post-sales SE kind of, sort of, and may have been a break fix customer service type person. But, this whole new world has really, completely evolved. And it's, obviously great, because the more you can, go and grow and supersize, customers, obviously you don't want to have them do less. You always want to have them do more. So that customer success person is really almost a Jack or Jane of all trades, and in so many different ways. Also
within the CRO function?
Craig, where do you put that?
Absolutely. The CRO owns the customer, owns the onboarding, the delivery, and the customer success. And to your point, David, we're in a SaaS business. your retention rates really are what drive the ultimate value of the company from an external valuation perspective. Your gross and net retention rates. If you've got a SaaS business and you're doing, just to make up numbers, $50 million worth of ARR, and you've got a 90+% retention rate, then the great thing is you've got $45 million already committed next year. Therefore, your sales teams just have to go, add new logos. And if you've got a great customer success team, they're also expanding your offerings into your install base. That's why you'll see then the net retention rates of companies often be in the 120, 130, 140% range, where they're taking their install base and growing it. And I don't know about Randy, but I think it's a lot easier in many cases to sell more to a happy client than trying to win potentially new logos from effort, energy, and conversion rates.
I want to ask each of you, again, curve benders, this is idea of incredible relationships in our lives that beyond helping us execute or perform in a transactional sense, profoundly shape the manager, the leader, the human being that we become. So, Craig, I'm going to start with you, and then I want to go to Seidl next. Can you think of one or two leaders that really made that indelible imprint on you as a leader today? Who shaped the CEO that Craig has become? And what did they say? What did they do? And then Seidl, I'm going to come to you.
Oh, wow. Okay. I would say that the one person who I would really attribute my success as the CEO at WhiteHat to, who I engaged 4.5, 5 years ago as my CEO coach, a gentleman called Cal Lai. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's done multiple startups. He's taken companies public. But he has been an inspiration to me as a coach, and has really helped shape me as a great leader. And the other thing I'd say is that, and if Cal was here, I hope he'd say it about me, is that I believe that Cal has had that influence because I was willing to be coachable, but I was coachable. And that's the other thing, is that to have a coach is great, but you've also got to be coachable, willing to explore within yourself what your defects of character are, or where your deficiencies are, be willing to acknowledge those and then do the work to change those. So Cal Lai has been a phenomenal contributor to my professional development over the last 6 years.
Interestingly enough, that's my make it or break it question of leaders I work with as well, is their responses to, are you coachable? Because you don't have to agree with me, you don't have to like what I say, but as long as you're open and willing to listen and certainly consider those options, that's where that growth is going to come from. Seidl, over to you. You've worked with a lot of amazing people over the years. Who's shaped you? What did Randy Seidl of the BC days to now, who really shaped the leader that you've become?
Yeah, I'm going to be sure. I just realized we're just about top of the hour here. So I think in summary, obviously been fortunate to have a lot of great ones, but I think Mark Hurd, rest in peace, really taught me a lot in terms of how to lead at scale with large people, large teams. And then Bill Campbell, also similarly, rest in peace, was just amazing, just in terms of being authentic, being yourself, how to help, how to give back, how to be charitable, and I could go on and on.
So thank you both. For our audience, you've been listening to Craig Hinkley, CEO of WhiteHat Security. On behalf of Randy Seidl and the sales community, thanks for joining us. Hopefully this was of interest and value to you. Don't forget, we turned the show notes from the podcast interview into articles. I would encourage you to go check out the podcast with Craig, Randy, and myself from this morning. We'll release a new episode every Wednesday. We've got some phenomenal guests joining us in the next several weeks. So I hope you'll subscribe wherever you consume podcasts. We also each week host that week's podcast guest on these LinkedIn Live, also available on Facebook and YouTube. So Craig, Randy, thanks for the time. Good to see you both. Look forward to seeing you again soon.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Nour.
David, Randy, it was awesome. Thank you very much, guys.